What's the creepiest thing you've ever done? Story 1. About 10 years ago, a friend of mine was going through a difficult breakup. She needed something to cheer her up, so I went to a local party store, bought about 40 different balloons filled with helium, some funny disguise glasses, and a noisemaker. I went to her apartment, had her buzz me in, and took the elevator up to her floor. Her door was open a crack, so I pushed it open and started singing a silly tune with the noisemaker in my mouth. A few seconds into the song, through all the balloons blocking my view, I saw a woman who was not my friend, wearing only a towel that was probably thrown on the second I entered, and I stopped singing just as she started to scream. Then a very large man, who looked to be about 10 feet tall, built like a bodybuilder with a deep look of anger in his eyes, pushed aside the balloons and started shouting something at me as I turned and ran as fast as I could toward the elevator. I finally made it to my friend's apartment, one floor up, just after she got off the phone from calling the police after hearing the screams in the apartment directly below her. Story 2. This is the kind of dark secret that still makes me feel conflicted about myself. My sister, who is 1 year younger than me, had a close friend I always had a crush on, but she was never interested in me. One day my sister asked me to fix her laptop, and I accidentally found a private video of the two of them fooling around. Neither of them seemed that way to me before, so I was surprised. I made the mistake of keeping a copy of the video and watching it many times. After a while, I realized that what unsettled me was not just about the friend, but also because it involved my sister. I began acting in a disturbing way, sneaking into her room at night and crossing boundaries while she was asleep. About a year and a half later, my sister tragically passed away in a car accident. Her friend came to the funeral, and while she was kneeling alone over the casket, saying her goodbyes, I caught myself thinking about what they used to do together. Back home, I rewatched the video and felt a mix of shame, confusion, and grief, realizing how deeply wrong my actions had been. Story 3. One night I was walking home really late and thought this guy was following me, but he was actually walking about 10 steps ahead of me. He kept making all the same turns I was making, so I assumed he lived near my apartment, but I did not realize it at the time. In my inebriated state, I wanted to make sure he did not try to rob me, so I walked faster toward him to show I was not afraid. He seemed scared and did not want me close, so he started awkwardly and quickly walking away. Then it hit me that this guy was really scared of me, just like I was scared of him. So I just started laughing and said, "I don't know who's more scared, me or you." The man did not even turn around. He just sprinted off into the night. He probably thought I was dangerous because of my nervous laugh. Story 4. Last year, I was out at a bar drinking and doing a good job of it. About 10 minutes before they closed, I got all determined and started talking to a random girl. She must have been on the same level as me, because we started kissing. They began closing and pushing people out, and I got her to give me a ride home. Once we were back at my place, we continued kissing, which eventually became more intense. About 10 minutes in, she suddenly said we had to stop. I asked why, and she became insistent, saying, "I can't do this," and started crying. I asked if I had done anything wrong, and she said no. Jokingly, I asked, "Is it because I am not good enough?" She said it wasn't that, but that she had just gotten out of a long relationship. I felt a mix of awkwardness and guilt, so I let her stay in my bed for the night. By the time it was close to 4 in the morning, I tried to sleep but kept waking up restless. I decided to quietly take care of myself, rolled over, and finally went to sleep. I showed her to the door the next morning, and we went our separate ways. Looking back, I think words like regrettable or unhealthy might describe this better than creepy does. Story 5. I once had a coworker whose cat had kittens. She said I could come see them but kept putting it off for about a month. Later, she brought it up again, and I told her that I was coming over to see the kittens before they grew up into cats. She said it was not a good night and that I would have to see them another time, but I told her I was not taking no for an answer. She had to drive another coworker home that night, so I insisted that I was going to follow them in my own car. She really did not want me following her home, so she tried to lose me, driving fast and taking sharp turns. I followed them for quite a while, but eventually they lost me. They even went in the wrong direction to do so. Still, I knew roughly which way led to her house, so I parked my car on the side of the road, turned off all the lights, and waited. Eventually, the two of them came back, at which point I flipped on my high beams to scare them and drove back onto the road. They turned down a side road and thought they had escaped, but really it was me who let them go. I drove at full speed to the house of the coworker with the kittens, parked 2 blocks away, and waited in her yard until she got home. About half an hour later, she finally pulled in, alone and looking exhausted. As she was about to put her key in the door, I jumped out and shouted, "Got you!" as I poked her side with my empty hand. She dropped her keys and screamed, then quickly pushed me away, snatched up her keys, got inside, and locked the door. She changed shifts after that, and I am lucky she did not get me fired. Story 6. A girl I knew was leaving the country, and I was interested in her housemate, who I had only seen as a Facebook friend of this girl. The girl I knew was trying to sell her phone, which I offered to handle for her. She forgot to clear the phone book, and it was out of battery when she remembered, so I promised to do a factory reset. I plugged it in when I got home and turned it on. I took the other girl's number from it, then sent her a last text saying, "My friend Chargelo is coming over later to look for the phone charger," just before the plane left. She replied, "Okay, is he nice?" And I replied, "Might be your type, he's single, he's a good guy, and looking for a girlfriend too." Or something close to that. I got dressed up, drove over, stopped a few doors down, did some push-ups beside the car to get pumped up, and went in. We looked around for about 15 minutes but could not find it because it was at my place. Then we had coffee together and agreed to meet later for dinner. I took her to a place close to home. She had a couple of glasses of wine. I took her back, and all was good for a while. We started dating, and I knew sooner or later I would get caught. Once her friends settled in and got back on Facebook, they would chat, and I would be talked about in detail. I contacted the friend first and told her I had always been interested in her housemate, then asked if she would mind if I dated her. She said it was fine. Then I admitted what I had done with the text. She said, "That's sneaky and cunning." I'm impressed but also a bit unsettled. Pretending to be me to recommend yourself to my friends. I'm not sure I'm okay with that. I apologized but pointed out that however it happened, it worked. And now 2 of her friends were in a relationship that could be good, so please don't tell her. After a couple of days, I decided to come clean. When I told her, I asked her not to be angry first. I admitted I had been interested in her after seeing her on Facebook, and that I set up the meeting. She was upset, saying she had to get me back for that, but not angry or creeped out. After a month of being together constantly, partying, eating junk food, and watching movies, she grew bored and we drifted apart. I replaced her quickly after she ended it. The original friend was upset with her over it and unsettled by my actions. I would not do that again because it felt like I had been a stalker hiding in plain sight. Story 7. I might have been around 15 when we went on a family trip to a water park. There was an attraction where every 30 minutes a powerful stream of water was run in a circle-like corridor and people in it were carried around continuously. When I tried it for the first time, there was a lot of chaos inside with people squeezed together. I did not like it at first, but the atmosphere and excitement of the day made me curious enough to give it another try. I put on my swimming goggles, went into the corridor, and waited. The water carried everyone in circles, and the whole situation felt overwhelming and surreal. After it was over, I stayed in the water for a few minutes, then stepped out to dry and get ready for the next round. It turned into a memorable day, one I thought about for a long time afterward. Story 8. I grew up in a very strict religious household. My parents banned television because they thought it was inappropriate, and I was homeschooled most of my life, not only so they could push their beliefs, but also to keep me sheltered. Because of this, I often felt isolated and repressed. One time, a relative and their fiancé came to stay with us, so my parents could meet them before the wedding. They were assigned separate rooms, but late at night, I heard noises and decided to check. That's when I realized they had found a way to spend time together despite the rules, and I was shocked that something so secretive was happening under our roof. Trying to spy on them, I could not see much through the darkness or the tiny keyhole, and when I made a noise near the door, they reacted quickly, even opening a window. I ran back to my room underneath theirs in our 2-story house. The next morning, I noticed something outside near my window box that made me realize they had been more daring than I imagined. The whole experience left me unsettled, conflicted, and confused, especially because it was the first time I had confronted adult realities in such a personal way. Story 9. In sophomore year of high school, I was looking for a homecoming date. My mom taught at another high school across town, and unaware of my search, she casually mentioned that a girl in one of her classes had commented on how handsome I looked in the photo on her desk. I immediately asked her name, looked her up in the yearbook, and confirmed that she was indeed pretty. I told my mom to give her my number, and we ended up chatting on the phone, with her quickly agreeing to go to homecoming with me. I wanted to meet her before the dance, but neither of us had licenses yet since we were only 15. I was already sneaking in some late-night drives, so I decided to meet her that weekend. These were the early days before widespread cell phones with GPS, so I had to drive half an hour relying only on directions. I got lost and finally arrived an hour late, only to find the house quiet. Frustrated, I nearly left but decided to be bold. I walked up to the porch, instinctively checked under the welcome mat, and to my surprise, there was a spare key. I used it to step inside the dark house and carefully made my way upstairs. When I opened the door, it turned out to be hers, and though shocked, she was not angry. Relieved, I laughed it off, and we ended up going downstairs, talking and hanging out for hours. By the time homecoming arrived, we had to pretend we were meeting for the first time when taking pictures with the parents, which was awkward. The dance itself was fun, and even though we never became close afterward, the entire experience left me realizing how reckless I had been. Things could have gone very badly if someone else had found me inside that night. Story 10. I met a woman at a bar and went home with her that night. The experience itself was unremarkable. We just were not really into it. I did not think about her again until I ran into her in the same office building months later. We had some small talk, but seeing her outside of that bar atmosphere triggered something in me. I started keeping track of when she was most likely to be in the lobby, 8 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and 6 in the evening, so I could be there at the same time, often showing up early and waiting just to bump into her. I even sent her anonymous flowers at work in hopes she would notice. That might sound like simple odd behavior, but I went further. When my apartment lease ended, I moved into her complex just so we could ride the bus together. I fabricated a story to the management and managed to get access to her apartment. I would go inside when she was not there, leave small items for her to find, and look through her things to learn more about her life. I copied the contents of her computer's hard drive, wrote down her passwords, and went through all her emails and messages to understand her better. I used the details I discovered, like her favorite peppermint hot chocolate from a coffee shop, to create coincidental encounters. After a year of this effort, I was back in her life, waiting for the right moment. When her boyfriend broke up with her, I consoled her, made my move, and we began dating. After a few months, we got married and had a child together. This was 4 years ago, and I have never told her the extent of what I did to make her mine, or how I transformed her in my mind from a stranger into someone I thought of as perfect. Story 11. There was a guy I really disliked back in high school. He was part of the popular crowd, always insulting me, and even dated my crush. Back then I had too much time on my hands, so I decided to give him a scare. I started sneaking into his backyard during the middle of the night. I would make strange noises, leave odd footprints in front of his window, and thump on the walls of his room unexpectedly. This went on for a couple of weeks. Then I began leaving him strange messages and unsettling little presents to find. One night I even left a disturbing message on his window using things I found in his yard. Sometimes I would tail him at night, making it obvious so he would know I was there and become more frightened. He started falling asleep in class regularly, and my friends told me he was becoming paranoid. After about a month of this, I decided I had done enough, as it was time-consuming. His family ended up moving the following summer, and I never saw him again. Story 12. A couple of months back, I went to a local community college to take an entrance exam for a job opportunity. There were about 200 people there, and I noticed someone among the crowd who immediately caught my attention. I did not think much of it, but out of all the seats in the room, she decided to sit right next to me, which I took as a lucky sign. During the test, nobody was allowed to talk, but at one point she raised her hand and told the instructor that she had accidentally filled out the wrong section of the test. I thought this was the perfect icebreaker, so I made a comment, but the interaction did not go far, and she quickly gave me a look that made me stop. During the test, I happened to glance at her paper and saw her name and the city she was living in. Later at home, curiosity got the better of me, and I searched online. I found her social media accounts, old pictures, and even blog posts she had written years before. I ended up spending an entire month obsessing over what I had found, realizing too late how far I had gone down a path that felt invasive and unhealthy. Story 13. When I was 12, one night in the middle of summer, after playing basketball with my cousins, I went to take a shower before bed. Above the bathtub, there was a long, slender window up near the ceiling. For some reason that night, I decided to climb onto the ledge and peek out into the neighbor's backyard. To my surprise, I noticed I had a clear view straight into their master bedroom, where I saw more than I expected. Given that this was before the internet was common, it felt like an incredible discovery. The next day at the same time, I tried again, and once more I saw something happening inside that made me feel both excited and nervous. By the third day, I even grabbed my parents' camcorder to record a few minutes of what I could see. On days 3 and 4, the same thing occurred, but on the fifth day, the curtains were closed and the lights stayed off. I still had some video, and after watching it repeatedly, I realized it was not just the content that excited me, but the thrill of trying to get away with recording. That summer, with my older cousin staying with us, I even rigged up a clumsy hidden camera setup in the bathroom out of curiosity, convinced she would not notice. When she finally came in, I panicked, certain she would find out. She stayed a long time, and when she eventually came out, she just apologized for using the bathroom too long and went to her room. My device was still intact. Watching the recording later, I saw her simply using the bathroom and adjusting her clothes, and I felt a rush of adrenaline from having risked so much. That experience scared me enough that I never tried anything like it again. I kept the tape hidden for years, but it remained as a reminder of how reckless and disturbing my behavior had been. Story 14. When I was 21, home for the summer from college, I was left in charge while my parents were away on a cruise, and my younger sister, who was 16, was supposed to listen to me. Instead, she had been generally disrespectful, yelling, refusing to help around the house, and constantly staying up late talking loudly with her friends on the phone until the early hours of the morning. Around 3 in the morning, I got up to use the restroom. On the way back to my room, I passed her door and heard her still talking on the phone. I thought to myself, here we go again, and was about to knock, but then I overheard a conversation that made it obvious she was speaking inappropriately with a friend. This shocked me, and I stepped away, unsure what to do. Since this was before cell phones, she had to use the house landline. Curious and unsettled, I went to the kitchen to look for the other phone and realized the handset was missing. Knowing our usual hiding places, I eventually found it and turned it on. I ended up overhearing far more than I should have, realizing she was talking to a guy from her high school. I felt disturbed by what I heard, but I stayed silent. She never found out that I knew. Story 15. A few years ago, back when MSN Messenger was the instant messaging platform everyone used, I created a fake account pretending to be a girl. Over weeks of practice, I improved my ability to roleplay online and became convincing enough that some people believed me. Using that fake account, I managed to trick several acquaintances into thinking they were chatting with a new female friend. At times, I even used edited video loops from unrelated sources to maintain the illusion. I got about 6 or 7 people to interact with me under this false identity, and I secretly recorded parts of these chats. Looking back, it was deceptive and unsettling, though at the time I told myself it was just a thrill. The closest I came to being caught was when I accidentally typed a message from the wrong account while talking to someone who also knew my real profile. Somehow, she did not notice. I was terrified but relieved. Reflecting on it now, it is clear how manipulative and wrong my actions were, even if nobody ever tied it back to me. Story 16. Once, as a freshman in high school overwhelmed by new feelings, I did something reckless during a school assembly because I was distracted by someone sitting next to me. I was wearing a sweater, and being very skinny, I thought I could hide my behavior under it without anyone noticing. At one point, she turned to me and asked, "Hey, are you okay?" Which made me realize how visible I probably looked. The worst part in my memory, however, was what came after: the overwhelming sense of guilt. Getting out of the crowded auditorium where assemblies were held was always hectic, and it became a walk of shame as I carried the secret of what I had done. It was a bad situation all around, and the embarrassment stayed with me for a long time. Looking back, I know it was reckless and wrong, but at the time I justified it to myself in ways that now make me cringe. Story 17. One day in math class during high school, I was incredibly bored. My brain never seemed to pick up math easily, and even with effort I struggled. Usually I just fell asleep. But this particular day I told my teacher my stomach hurt and was allowed to go see the nurse. Our school had just implemented a policy requiring students to sign out if leaving class. But since I had a good reputation, he did not make me sign anything. Instead of going to the nurse, I sat in the bathroom for a while, played games on my phone, and washed my hands repeatedly. I remembered reading about graffiti and dramatic threats, and without really thinking, I pulled out a pen and wrote a dark line from a book on the stall wall. It looked incomplete, so I exaggerated it by adding a large ominous word, trying to make it look dramatic. Then I left and went about the day as if nothing had happened. The next morning, the whole school was in chaos. Someone had discovered it, students were upset, and teachers were whispering. Officers were stationed at all entrances, and students had to be escorted between classes. Since my name was not on any sign-out sheet, I was not questioned. Rumors spread quickly. Some thought it was a threat, others said it was a note, and wild theories filled the halls. A few even praised whoever did it for shaking things up. For about a week, police were stationed at the doors, and the story carried on as gossip. Eventually, there were no suspects, no confessions, and life went back to normal. By graduation, no one mentioned it anymore, though the lack of real security at that school still amazes me. Looking back, it was reckless, and while I laughed at the time, I know it could have caused serious consequences for others. Story 18. While I was in college, my friend and I had this inside joke with a guy I also liked at the time, where we pretended he was following us, but as inside jokes often do, it eventually evolved into all of us mutually teasing each other. It mostly involved Facebook or spotting each other from across campus and calling to ask things like, "Why are you walking into the library?" At one point, he found my phone number and dorm room in the campus registry and showed up at my door. I once joked to him online that my friend was asleep on my bed, and he called her up and startled her for a moment. It was all harmless fun. When his birthday came around, we decided to make a silly stalker web page as a gag gift. We photoshopped his face sloppily onto funny images using Microsoft Paint, like pictures of my brother brushing his teeth or sleeping, and added some goofy poems. It was all obviously a joke, and he thought it was funny. The page was eventually taken down by Google for violating its terms of service, but by then it had run its course. Looking back now, it's funny to think that what started as a silly prank has turned into something real. We have been happily dating for 3 years now. Story 19. This task required all of my persistence. Once I was at a gathering for students who had placed in the top percentage of a provincial school competition. There were about 250 people there in total. I bumped into a girl I thought was cute and started talking to her, but in my attempt to seem mysterious, I never asked her name. I later regretted this since I did not think I would get another chance to see her. Determined, I tried to track her down. None of my friends had noticed her, so it was up to me alone. I asked another friend who worked as an administrator for the event to let me see the entire list of participants, about 2,000 names. I sorted through the list and then searched each girl's name on Facebook until I found the right person. It took a long time, but eventually I matched her profile and even realized we had a mutual friend. I called him up and begged him to introduce us casually so I could have another chance to talk to her. Story 20. When I was 15, my family moved from the West to the East Coast. The only close relative we had there was my aunt, whom I had not seen in about 10 years and hardly remembered. Everyone in my dad's family was considered very attractive, and people always told me that this aunt was especially beautiful. I did not think much of it until she picked us up from the airport, and I was surprised by how striking she looked. I instantly developed a crush. Over the years, I struggled with this obsession. At a family gathering when I was 17, I had been drinking for only the second time in my life and was sent upstairs after acting foolish. My aunt, who was also a little tipsy, came upstairs later to comfort me, telling me not to feel bad about what had happened. She kissed me on the cheek in a caring way and then fell asleep in my arms. I made a bad decision and crossed boundaries by touching her inappropriately. She pushed me away but did not say anything, and eventually my dad came to guide her to her room. I expected punishment, but she never told anyone. Afterward, I avoided her for a year, and when I finally saw her again, she treated me differently and never spoke to me the same way. Now I am 21 and realize that it has become more of an unhealthy fixation than anything else. She once told me I was her most handsome nephew, which only fueled my obsession. I have been working out and sometimes catch myself still thinking about her, but I know deep down it is wrong and a burden I needed to get off my chest. Story 21. I was getting my teeth cleaned the other day. The dental hygienist was very attractive and had me pinned down with that intense vibrating tooth scraping device. My gums were not in great shape, so it hurt a lot. The pain was so strong, and she was right in my face, so I could even smell her breath while she worked behind her mask. Every once in a while, I found myself staring into her eyes, completely distracted, and several times I had to calm myself down in my head because of the stress and nerves. I think she noticed something was off whenever my expression changed, and eventually she just stopped before finishing the cleaning. The strangest part was that when it was over, I felt almost euphoric. On the way out, I kept tripping over my feet, stumbling over my words while trying to schedule another appointment. I felt so giddy, like I had just gone through something exciting and overwhelming. I did not even catch her name, but I left the office with a nervous laugh I could not control. Story 22. I am a girl rather picky about my boyfriends, and that has caused me some trouble in the past. This story is from about 10 years ago, when I was 16 and in high school, a shy student who did well in choir. Even then, I preferred someone who was calm, confident, and musically inclined. There was one guy, Chris, who was not talented in music, but had a calm presence that made me want to be around him. During junior prom, I went with friends but no date, secretly hoping to get closer to him. We all went to dinner beforehand, and I tried to make conversation with him by sharing appetizers. He ate with such enthusiasm that I was oddly fascinated, and at the dance I found myself watching him constantly. At one point he hurried to the bathroom, clearly embarrassed afterward, and I overheard him telling a friend not to go inside. For some reason, this stuck with me and became one of the strangest moments of my high school years. I snuck into the bathroom out of curiosity and realized what had happened. Instead of being put off, I found myself weirdly fixated on the whole situation. Looking back, it was the creepiest thing I ever did, sneaking into that empty restroom just because I was obsessed with Chris. I never told him and never pursued anything further, but the memory stayed with me as one of the most bizarre things I have ever done. Story 23. When I was a sophomore in high school, I learned about phishing, which at the time was not very well known, and when most people still used America Online. I decided to send all of my friends an America Online InstaKiss invite that actually led to a fake page and collected about 20 passwords from friends and crushes. I had a fun week searching their inboxes to see if anyone was talking about me, and I ended up discovering gossip about who liked who and all of that fun stuff. It felt like social media before social media, and in my mind, it was mostly harmless curiosity. The creepiest part, though, was that I had a small crush on one guy who had recently started dating a girl from another school. I noticed he had been sending flirtatious emails to someone else, so I accidentally forwarded one of those messages from his inbox to his girlfriend, and later confirmed that they had broken up. After that, I decided he was not worth my time anyway, but at the time I convinced myself I was doing something noble. He eventually got married and divorced in his early 20s, while I grew up into what I consider a well-adjusted adult with a career building websites. But looking back, I definitely had my creepy moments in high school. Story 24. I have had plenty of embarrassing moments in my life, but one of the creepiest happened when I was around 13 during a vacation in a tropical beach town with 3 girlfriends. We had huge crushes on a group of guys in their early 20s who were staying in the same hotel. One evening, we noticed them dressed up nicely, which was unusual in a place where most people wore shorts and flip-flops, so we assumed they were heading out for the night. Giggling, we followed at a distance until they drove away, and then we decided to sneak around their room. At first, we just peeked through the windows, but to our surprise, their door was unlocked. The 4 of us rushed inside and acted silly, poking through their luggage. checking the fridge, smelling their cologne, and laughing at how sneaky we thought we were. We even took goofy pictures of ourselves wearing their clothes in ridiculous ways before carefully putting everything back. We tried our best to leave the room exactly as it was and then hurried out, never speaking of it again. It was childish, invasive, and definitely creepy, but at the time we thought it was hilarious. Story 25. The subject was a brunette junior I had a serious crush on when I was a senior. I think she disliked me and saw me as a bit of a creeper. Fast forward to a field trip where we went to see a city from a tower. I was one of the first people on the elevator, and then she and her classmates crowded in. She ended up directly in front of me, backing toward me as I pressed into the rear wall of the lift. As more people piled in, she was pushed back further. The situation became uncomfortable, and despite trying to pull away, I could not prevent an awkward physical contact from happening for a brief second before she realized what was going on and looked at me in shock. I quickly mouthed an apology and tried to retreat as far back as I could against the wall. We never spoke of it again during the rest of the trip, and afterwards she never exchanged another word with me. The few times I ran into her after graduation, she simply gave me a blank stare. She is now married with children, and perhaps our personalities were never compatible, but part of me still wonders what might have been if things had been different. Story 26. I once had a female roommate, and living together created a lot of tension because I was attracted to her, but nothing ever happened between us. At one point, I even suggested casually dating, but it never went anywhere. Over time, my obsession with her grew in unhealthy ways. When she would leave the apartment, I would snoop through her belongings, and this continued for years, even after we were no longer roommates. Eventually, she trusted me and my partner enough to give us a spare key to her apartment in case of emergencies, but instead of respecting that, I misused it. When she was out of town, I would let myself in, go through her personal things, and even access her accounts when I found ways to do so. I uncovered private material that was never meant for me, and I kept feeding my obsession. Even though I have been in a serious relationship for many years, I still found myself thinking about her constantly, not because I loved her, but because of the unresolved tension from our time as roommates. Looking back, I recognize how invasive and disturbing my behavior was, and it is something that weighed on me for a long time. Story 27. At first, I thought the lack of stories about sniping was outrageous, and that maybe I was more messed up than I had realized. But then I figured it was probably so common that people just did not think it worth mentioning. By sniping, I mean secretly taking pictures or videos of people in public places. Thinking back, the first time I ever tried something like that was when I was about 10 at camp with an old camera. I got caught right away, and it became one of those embarrassing memories I carried for years. Later on, I had other moments of immaturity while growing up. Things like invading my siblings' privacy or sneaking through their belongings, which I now regret. As a teenager, I even kept lists of people I had crushes on, and I built up habits that were more about obsession than anything healthy. By my 30s, I realized how strange my behavior had been, and that what I once thought of as curiosity was actually inappropriate. The truth is, I never crossed into doing anything criminal, but I did indulge in unhealthy patterns that stayed with me longer than I'd like to admit. I even had a toxic relationship in my 20s where boundaries got blurred and my decisions were driven more by frustration than respect. Looking back, I cringe at the way I acted, snooping, spying, recording things I shouldn't have, and I know it was creepy, invasive, and unfair to others. These days, I consider myself more grounded, but I sometimes think back on those experiences as a reminder of how easy it is to justify bad behavior when you are young and reckless. Story 28. In early high school, before Facebook was a thing, I would spend hours collecting pictures of girls I knew from early social networking sites or even scanning them from yearbooks. I went too far with it, creating awkward, edited images that I thought were funny at the time. I stored everything on my computer in hidden folders alongside other things I had downloaded. Eventually, I got careless and forgot to clear my computer history, and my siblings found the stash. I was so embarrassed that I stayed in my room for days and avoided anything similar for months afterward. They never told my parents, but I am pretty sure they still think of me as a creep to this day. Looking back, it was one of those cringeworthy teenage phases where curiosity and immaturity got the best of me. Story 29. I once applied for an entry-level loan processor job with a government agency. I received an email saying I did not meet the qualifications for an interview, which frustrated me because I had 8 years of banking and loan experience and had just completed my bachelor's degree in business administration with a 3.4 GPA. Feeling like something was off, I searched online for the human resources specialist who made the decision. I was surprised at how much information I could find and began wondering if bias might have played a role. From what I could see, she was new in her position and connected with groups that I thought might have influenced her judgment. Out of curiosity, I even stopped by the agency office and noticed the person hired instead of me was from a different background. I could not prove anything, and it was entirely possible they were more qualified, but I was left with the uneasy feeling that I had been overlooked unfairly. In the end, I realized I had gone too far digging into someone's life, and it only made me feel worse. I decided I would never go down that road again, because it was healthier not to obsess over what I could not control. Story 30. The creepiness of this story does not come directly from me, but I was involved, so I count it as valid. I was at a weekend drill with my Army Reserve unit, and we had to travel to another city for a training event. Because there was an odd number of people, I ended up with my own hotel room, while another guy, who I will call Bob, had to share with an unpleasant roommate and his wife. Out of politeness, I offered to let Bob stay in my room, not expecting anything unusual. That night, around 2:30 in the morning, Bob came to my door with a woman, clearly drunk. He handed me his bank card and told me to go eat somewhere, but I refused and went back to bed. A few minutes later, I heard them whispering, followed by hours of noise that made it impossible for me to sleep. I lay there with a pillow over my head, completely uncomfortable, and got maybe 45 minutes of rest before we had to report back the next morning. When the woman left, Bob apologized and said he had even considered asking if I wanted to be part of what happened, which horrified me. As someone who values my faith and personal boundaries, I was shaken and disgusted by the whole experience. To this day, I still consider it one of the most disturbing nights of my life. Story 31. I once visited my best friend's house. I had known his family for a long time, and my mom often babysat for them. On that particular day, my friend suggested we hide in his parents' closet as a prank, since they were upstairs getting ready. I agreed, not realizing how uncomfortable it might become. We hid quietly among the coats, waiting, and soon his parents entered the room after showering. From our hiding spot, we accidentally witnessed things children should not see. We stayed completely silent, frozen in place, not daring to move. Once they left the room, we crept back out and went to play video games again, as if nothing had happened. None of us ever spoke of it afterward, but the memory of hiding in that closet stuck with me for years as one of the strangest and most uncomfortable experiences of my childhood. Story 32. Back in high school, I decided for some reason that I was going to mess with a kid in my art class who was well-liked, and even the class president. I made a fake screen name on America Online Instant Messenger and pretended to be his friend who sat next to him, sending angry messages as if I was upset with him. The next day, he confronted that classmate, and I realized how funny it was to watch him confused. I kept doing it, pretending to be different people in the class, and every day he would get more flustered. Eventually, I decided to take it further and made it seem like I was some kind of stalker. With help from a few friends, I wrote creepy notes and left them on his desk, sometimes even tossing them onto his seat without being noticed, which confused him even more. We once photoshopped his profile picture with a silly edit and left it where he would find it, making the whole class laugh. The prank went on for weeks, and after a break, we even left a note at his house, though we accidentally delivered it to his grandparents' place across the street. By Monday, he was spooked, but also laughing with everyone else. When I finally admitted that it had been me all along, he actually thought it was hilarious, and the whole thing ended up making that class much more entertaining. Story 33. I hate myself for it, but sometimes I go on Facebook and scroll through people's pages obsessively. It usually starts by looking at a friend's list of friends and then clicking on people who seem attractive, interesting, or who have unusual names or are from different countries. Once I find someone, I look through whatever information is available on their profile and pictures, and I decide if they meet some internal criteria I can't even fully explain. If they do, I bookmark their page and sometimes save a few photos that seem funny, interesting, or visually appealing. Then I move on to their friends and repeat the process. Over time, I have bookmarked thousands of pages and saved hundreds of megabytes worth of random photos. The strange part is that I never go back to the bookmarks or look at the pictures again. I do not use them for anything other than this compulsive archiving. It feels like a pack rat instinct, like I need to collect and save them, even though they mean nothing once I have them. I feel ashamed of this practice, but I cannot seem to stop. It has become a weird, obsessive habit that I do not fully understand, and it makes me question why I feel compelled to keep doing it. Story 34. I was staying in a hostel in a 10-bedroom room. I was on the bottom bunk and my buddy was on the top. Across from us were two Australian girls, and in the corner of the room were two sisters from California. I had spoken with all of them earlier that night and felt like I had made a solid impression. In the middle of the night, I woke up restless and nervous, hoping maybe one of them would notice me. At one point, one of the Australian girls turned over, and then one of the sisters sat up and looked over in my direction. I froze, unsure if she was actually awake or just half asleep. A little later, she walked past me on the way to the bathroom, glancing my way, and I could not tell if it was intentional or not. When she returned to her bed, she moved around a bit under her covers, and I interpreted it as her being aware of me. The next morning, one of the Australian girls mentioned to her friend that she had been up for hours, and then quickly smiled at me. Later, when I saw the sisters in the lobby, one of them smiled too, which made my day. Looking back, nothing really came of it, but the whole night left me with a mix of embarrassment and the strange thrill of wondering if they had actually been paying attention to me. Story 35. A friend of mine who I secretly had feelings for once asked me to help her move files between two computers and securely delete everything on her old one before getting rid of it. She left the computers with me for the weekend, and while I did the job she asked, I also crossed a line by copying her personal files out of curiosity. I justified it to myself at the time because I was infatuated with her, but I knew it was wrong. Later, I looked through what I had taken and found personal emails and private pictures. It was invasive, and I knew she had trusted me, but I still kept those files hidden away for years. Even now, we are still friends, and she has no idea what I did back then. Looking back as an adult, I feel ashamed of violating that trust, and I realize how inappropriate and creepy it was. It remains one of those memories that make me cringe about the choices I made when I was younger. Story 36. Back in college, there was a girl who made it very obvious she was into me. It was not subtle at all. She would get excited when I showed up, whisper to her friends, and sometimes even jump up and down when she saw me. I thought she was beautiful, and we would make eye contact a lot in the dining hall. But I never had the courage to actually talk to her. I didn't know her name, Major, or anything about the people she hung out with. It almost felt like she was the one doing the chasing, which was flattering but also intimidating. Around that time, Facebook launched, and I occasionally browsed through profiles just for fun, hoping I might stumble across hers. A year and a half later, I finally did. I debated for a while, but eventually decided to send her a poke. Instead of responding, she blocked me. I figured it was worth the risk, but it clearly wasn't meant to be. Looking back, I realized that our beliefs and interests were quite different anyway, but even today, I still feel nervous when I remember it. After that, whenever I saw her on campus, I would avoid eye contact, and I think she did the same. Story 37. I once hid an entire secret relationship from a close friend, which still makes me feel conflicted. Back in high school, I had dated a girl briefly, and not long after we broke up, she started dating my friend. Their relationship lasted longer than mine with her had, and I stopped talking to both of them for a while. Later, after graduation, we reconnected at a party hosted at my friend's house. We ended up spending the night there and realized we still had feelings for each other. Things escalated, and we started sneaking around behind his back. She had another long-distance boyfriend at the time, which added another layer of complication, but she justified it by saying he wasn't exactly faithful either. I knew my friend still had feelings for her, so I never told him, but the three of us continued hanging out often. Whenever he left the room, she and I would sneak a kiss or act like nothing was going on. but the guilt of keeping that secret never went away. Looking back, it was incredibly awkward and dishonest, and I am not sure if my friend ever realized how much was happening right under his nose. Story 38. Freshman year of college, I had been spending a lot of time with a girl I liked, but I thought she still had a boyfriend at another school. I later learned they had broken up a few weeks earlier. One Halloween weekend, after a long night of partying, we went to her room to watch a movie, and we both ended up falling asleep in her bed. This had actually happened before since we were good friends. Later that night, I woke up still drunk and thought she was moving toward me. So I misread the situation and leaned in to kiss her. She had actually been asleep and woke up partway through, and we stopped without saying much. The next morning I had to leave early, but later she texted me asking if I remembered what happened. I admitted I did, and she explained she had been asleep at the time. I was horrified and embarrassed, but she wasn't going to let our friendship end over it. A couple of days later, she made sure we hung out and we talked everything through. Strangely enough, that moment led us to start dating, and we ended up together for the next 7 months. Story 39. I once had a crush on a girl I met through a friend, and from the moment we met at a sushi restaurant, I was completely smitten. Normally, I was shy and nervous around girls, but with her, I felt more confident and held good conversation. She was an actress, and since I was a budding photographer, I would often check her Facebook profile and look for excuses to message her. Eventually, she asked me to take her headshots, and even though I was new to photography, I agreed. On the day of the shoot, she arrived late, but we still managed to take some good pictures. Afterward, we had sushi together and talked about her life, acting, and the kind of guys she liked. She mentioned she preferred tall, nerdy types, and I thought that described me, but I didn't make a move. A few days later, she returned my memory card and casually mentioned another guy she was starting to like. I felt crushed. To make matters worse, I had accidentally lost her original photos, but I managed to recover a few from my camera and delivered them to her work as a surprise. That's when she told me she had a boyfriend. I was devastated and realized I had let my hopes get too high. Story 40. After a Pride event in San Francisco, I was with some friends, including a girl I secretly liked but knew I had no chance with. Things got chaotic after an incident in the city, so the group split up. I decided not to go to a bar with the others because of the high cover charge and instead took the bus home. Still restless, I ended up going by the girl's house, even though I knew she and her roommates would not be home for hours. Out of sheer curiosity and poor judgment, I went inside without permission and started snooping around. I looked through her things and found items that shocked and confused me, some of which were personal and clearly not meant for anyone else to see. I even made copies of some files from her computer before leaving. At the time, I justified it to myself as exploration, but in reality, it was invasive and wrong. Looking back, I realize how creepy and disrespectful it was, and it remains one of the most shameful memories of my college years. Story 41. Back in high school, I went on a date with a girl that turned into one of the most awkward nights of my life. I took my mom's car without permission and picked her up, but I had no plan for where to go. First, we drove to a poorly lit park in the middle of winter, which was uncomfortable and strange. Then I brought her to a frozen canal, which only made things creepier. Finally, I tried to impress her by driving up to a hilltop park with a great view of the city, but the dark, overgrown road leading there felt unsettling. She eventually asked me to take her home, and we barely made it back because I almost ran out of gas. That was bad enough, but a few weeks later, I made things worse. I saw her at school from a distance, and instead of just saying hi, I texted her, "Are you reading a book right now?" While watching her reaction from where she could not see me. When she checked her phone and looked around nervously, I knew it was her. I then walked up, tapped her on the shoulder, awkwardly said I didn't know what I was doing there, and walked away. We never talked again after that, and looking back, I cringe at how strange and creepy my behavior must have seemed. Story 42. Freshman year of college, I lived in a huge dorm where most of the doors looked the same. And because of that, people often left little decorations or notes on their doors so friends could find them. There was a girl down the hall who always left colorful sticky notes with quotes or doodles, and I thought she was funny and interesting, even though we had never actually spoken. For weeks, I would pass by, read what she had put up, and keep walking. One night I decided to take it further. After making sure the hall was empty, I quietly pulled one of her sticky notes off her door and kept it. The next day, I saw her putting up a new one, so I went back later and took that one too. Soon I had a small pile of them hidden in a notebook, almost like I was collecting baseball cards. It felt like I had a secret connection to her, even though she had no idea I existed. One night during finals, she wrote something about being stressed and craving ice cream. The next evening, I left a pint of her favorite brand in front of her door with no note, thinking she would see it as a random act of kindness. Instead, I overheard her telling a friend she was creeped out that someone knew her preference. She stopped putting sticky notes on her door after that. I realized I had crossed a line from casual curiosity into behavior that felt invasive. I never admitted it to anyone, and I quietly threw the collection away before moving out. It still makes me cringe to think that I wanted so badly to feel close to someone that I convinced myself taking pieces of her personality off her door was harmless. Story 43. When I was around 17, I developed a small obsession with one of my classmates. She sat 2 rows ahead of me in English class and always wore the same perfume. I would notice it even after she left the room, and it became this weird trigger for me. I associated it with her laugh, her handwriting, the way she tilted her head when answering questions. One afternoon when the class ended, I accidentally left my notebook on my desk so I could circle back after everyone had gone. I saw her desk still had a doodle she had sketched in pencil during the lecture, and without thinking, I tore off the page. I kept it folded in my wallet, telling myself it was like a lucky charm. A few weeks later, I found out where she usually sat in the cafeteria and started timing my lunches so I could pass by. I would never sit with her, just walk through slowly enough to catch a glimpse. Once I even sprayed a tester of the same perfume on my wrist from a store just to feel like I was closer to her. The creepiest part came one day when I noticed she had left her sweater draped over her chair in the classroom after lunch. I picked it up, intending to return it, but I froze when I realized what I was doing, standing there clutching it like it was something precious. My hands started to shake, and I finally set it back down. Nobody saw me, but I saw myself, and it was enough. I felt ashamed for weeks. We graduated, she moved away, and I never confessed how weirdly invested I had become in someone who barely knew me. Story 44. In my early 20s, I lived in an apartment complex where the mailboxes were all lined up in the same row outside. One evening, I came home at the same time as a neighbor I found attractive. We had exchanged nods before, but never full conversations. She dropped a piece of mail while unlocking her box, and without thinking, I bent down and picked it up. I glanced at the name and address before handing it back. Later that night, my curiosity got the better of me. Using just her name, I looked her up on social media and instantly found her profiles. Within hours, I knew the name of her dog, the coffee shop she liked, and even the playlist she shared. Over the next couple of weeks, I started coincidentally showing up at the coffee shop she posted about, hoping she would notice me. Sometimes she did, but only as a stranger in the background. One Saturday, she mentioned on a post that she was excited about a local street fair. I went too, lingering near the booth she had liked on Instagram, but I never approached her. Instead, I walked home feeling both thrilled and disgusted with myself. It dawned on me that I had built this entire fantasy connection based on information she had never intended for me to use in that way. Eventually, I unfollowed the trail of accounts I had clicked through and tried to let it go. To this day, I still feel unsettled by how easy it was to slide from neighborly curiosity into behavior that could easily be seen as stalking, and I'm glad I recognized it before it went further. Story 45. Back in high school, the library was one of the few places where students could hang out quietly without a teacher hovering. I used to go there during lunch, not because I loved reading, but because the girl I liked always sat in the same corner table with her friends. I never had the courage to sit down with them, so I found a desk 2 rows over where I could pretend to study while sneaking glances. Over time, I started noticing little habits. She chewed on her pen, tapped her foot when nervous, always carried a red notebook. One afternoon, she left in a hurry and forgot that notebook on the table. I stared at it for a good 5 minutes before walking over, picking it up, and telling myself I would return it the next day. Instead, I opened it. Most of the pages were just math problems and doodles, But there were also short entries about her day, almost like a journal. Reading those felt like crossing a line, but I kept going. I didn't take it home, just flipped through until I felt sick with guilt and put it back on her desk. The next morning she found it and laughed with her friends about how scatterbrained she was. She never suspected anyone had opened it. For weeks I couldn't look her in the eye because I knew I had invaded her privacy, all for the sake of feeling closer. That single act taught me more about respecting boundaries than any lecture ever could. Story 46. The creepiest thing I did in high school happened during gym class. I was never athletic, so I was usually one of the last kids out of the locker room. One day I noticed that the popular crowd left their backpacks unzipped in the corner, and my curiosity got the better of me. In one of the bags was a disposable camera, you know, the kind people used before phones had good ones. I pulled it out and flipped through the little dial, imagining what pictures might be on there. I didn't take any photos myself, but the thought of peeking into someone else's life without them knowing gave me a strange thrill. I quickly put it back before anyone noticed. Over the next week, I kept looking at that bag every time we changed, tempted to take the camera and get the film developed just to see. I never went that far, but the temptation stuck with me. Later, when I saw the same student showing off the printed pictures in the cafeteria, laughing with his friends over snapshots from a party, I felt both relieved and ashamed. Relieved that I hadn't done something unforgivable, but ashamed that I had even considered it. That day I learned how thin the line is between curiosity and crossing into someone else's privacy. Story 47. During a backpacking trip through Europe, I stayed in a busy hostel in Prague. The dorm had 12 beds and constant noise, but I quickly noticed one traveler who seemed different from the rest. Quiet, artistic, sketching in a notebook late at night. I never introduced myself, though I wanted to. Instead, I began paying attention to her routines. What time she came back, which bunk she chose, even the pattern of the bracelet she wore. One night, she left her sketchbook on the common table while talking with friends on the balcony. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Page after page of drawings, faces, landscapes, quick doodles spilled out. I didn't take pictures or steal anything, but I lingered far too long, flipping through what was clearly private. When I heard footsteps, I panicked, shoved it shut, and left. Later that night, she picked up the book and frowned at the slightly bent cover. She didn't say anything, but I knew she must have sensed someone had touched it. I avoided her for the rest of my stay, ashamed that I had violated her trust without even speaking a word to her. The creepiest thing wasn't just reading her personal sketches, but realizing I had built an entire fantasy connection in my head without her knowing I existed. It was a sobering reminder that fascination doesn't give you the right to cross into someone else's private world. Story 48. At my first office job, I was the youngest person in the department and often felt invisible. There was one coworker, though, who stood out to me. Always cheerful, always dressed neatly, and she seemed to know everyone's name. We weren't friends, just colleagues, but I became fascinated with her. At first it was harmless, noticing what time she usually arrived, which coffee mug she used, or the way she hummed when she typed. But it grew into something stranger. I started timing my trips to the kitchen so we would accidentally bump into each other. When she mentioned a favorite cafe, I began showing up there on my lunch breaks, pretending it was a coincidence. The lowest point came when I walked past her desk after hours and noticed a post-it with her gym schedule stuck to her monitor. I copied the details into my phone. A few days later, I went to the same gym, hoping we would run into each other. We did, but the look of surprise on her face made me realize how wrong it felt. She smiled politely, but I could tell she was unsettled. I never followed her again, and I forced myself to delete the schedule from my phone. Looking back, the creepiest part wasn't what I did, but how easily I justified it to myself in the moment. Convincing myself it was just curiosity when really it was me crossing boundaries I had no right to cross.